You can pay her bills, you can bring her into your world of luxury, but you can't erase the debt she owes me. And believe me, I'll always come collect." The threat, delivered in a low, sinister whisper, more menacing than a scream, slithered through the refined atmosphere of the charity gala. Connor Sterling felt Savannah shiver beside him, a shiver of pure fear that his tailored tuxedo couldn't conceal, and his hand instinctively tightened around her arm, not to restrain her, but as an anchor. He looked down at the man before them, a ghost from a past he didn't know, and for the first time in his meticulously controlled life, Connor, the city's most formidable lawyer, realizes he's facing a problem that can't be solved with a contract or a checkbook. The magnificent ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel in Boston is at its zenith. Under the warm glow of giant crystal chandeliers, the city's elite gather, evening gowns shimmering like a galaxy, glasses clinking and laughter blending with the melodious tunes of a jazz orchestra. This is Sterling & Croft's annual charity gala, an event that not only raises money but also affirms the city's position as the city's premier law firm. Standing in a corner, Connor Sterling. 40 surveyed the scene with controlled satisfaction. He, in his perfectly tailored Brioni tuxedo, was the firm's managing partner, the architect of this perfect evening. Every detail, from the guest list to the menu, had been vetted and approved by him. He was a problem solver, a master of logic and control. And tonight, everything was under control, especially the flowers. They were spectacular, not the usual red roses or white lilies. Instead, vibrant works of art were placed everywhere, colorful wildflowers interspersed with delicate ferns, peonies blooming proudly alongside flowers Connor didn't even know the names of. They brought life to the room, a tamed wildness, a perfect contrast to the rigidity of the upper class. All of them were her work, Savannah Hales. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for her. He found her near the entrance, her honey-colored hair pulled back in a loose bun, a few stray strands falling across her flushed cheeks. She wasn't wearing a gown, just a simple, elegant black dress, as if she wanted to blend into the shadows, letting her flowers shine. She was adjusting a crooked branch in a giant vase, her lips pursed in concentration. Suddenly, a figure broke away from the crowd and blocked her path. It was a man in a suit, but the suit looked cheap and ill-fitting. There was something off about the way he moved, a rudeness that didn't belong here. Connor narrowed his eyes. He saw the man say something, and Savannah's smile faded, replaced by an unconcealed look of panic. He took a step closer, grabbing her arm, even from a distance. Connor could feel the tension in his grip, the hidden aggression. "That's Marco Gallo. Found you. Baby," he hissed, low enough to be unnoticeable, but loud enough for Savannah to hear every venomous syllable. "You think you can run forever?" Connor's protective instincts kicked in, strong and immediate. He didn't think. He acted. He moved quickly and silently through the crowd, greetings and polite nods passing by like a blur. In seconds, he was behind Marco. He didn't touch Savannah. He placed a hand on Marco's shoulder, his fingers squeezing with a precise, calculated force. Not enough to hurt, but enough to convey an unmistakable message of power and threat. Marco turned around, ready to fight, but then he saw Connor. He saw the expensive tuxedo, the Patek Philippe watch, and most importantly, Connor's icy gray eyes. "Let her go," Connor said. His voice was low and dangerous, devoid of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. Marco hesitated, his grip loosening slightly. Connor didn't wait for an answer. He continued, his voice even but each word like a hammer blow. "Whatever debt you think she owes you, send me the bill." In that moment, 3 people stood in a tense triangle in the middle of a lavish party. A predator suddenly stopped, a prey trembling with fear, and an unwilling protector. A powerful lawyer who had just announced that he would pay for a debt he did not know about, for a prostitute he had only known for 2 months. 2 months ago. They canceled the contract. Connor growled into the phone, his hand gripping the Mont Blanc pen so tightly his knuckles turned white. Only 8 weeks until the gala on the other end of the line, his assistant, David, was stammering an apology. The prestigious event planning company they had worked with for the past 5 years had suddenly gone bankrupt. The entire gala plan, including the floral arrangements, had gone up in smoke. "Find someone else," Connor ordered. "Now, I don't care who they are, as long as they can get the job done." An hour later, David walked into Connor's office, looking both relieved and worried. "Sterling, I found a place. There are a lot of good reviews online. A blog post on Hidden Gems of Boston called them artistic and unique. The flower shop is called Petal and Stem." Unique, Connor raised an eyebrow. He hated uniqueness. He liked reliability, familiarity, but he didn't have many options. Address. 15 minutes later, his Audi A8 pulled up in front of a small shop in the South End. It didn't look like an upscale flower shop. It looked more like a fairy tale cottage, with mint green windows and a hand-painted wooden sign. Connor walked in and immediately felt out of place. The air in the shop smelled not of artificial perfume, but of damp earth, fresh leaves, and the sweet scents of dozens of different flowers. The space was cluttered, but it was cluttered on purpose. Buckets of colorful flowers were on the floor. Rolls of ribbon and wrapping paper lay on an old wooden table, and rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating the tiny dust motes floating in the air. Behind the counter, a woman was arranging a vase of flowers. She had honey-colored hair tied back hastily with a pencil. Her hands were covered in dirt and green stains from leaves. She wore a frayed linen apron. "That's Savannah Hale." She looked up at the sound of the doorbell, her green eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of him. He, in his $5,000 business suit, looked like a penguin lost in a rainforest. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice friendly but a little wary. "I'm Connor Sterling," he said, his voice dry and impatient. "My assistant called you about the Sterling and Croft Gala." "Oh, yeah," Savannah nodded. "David, he seems really stressed. We need a florist for an event. A very important event. 800 guests. At the Fairmont Copley Plaza." He spoke as if reading a legal brief. "Are you qualified to handle a contract of this magnitude?" Savannah paused. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked him straight in the eye. Connor was used to people being wary of him, but she wasn't. She looked at him like he was a puzzle to be solved. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice no longer friendly, "my ability is not the issue. The issue is whether your style is compatible with mine. Do you want identical, mechanically arranged bouquets? Or do you want something with emotion? With a story?" Connor was taken aback. No one had ever spoken to him like that. "I want something that looks professional and classy." "Luxury doesn't mean boring," she retorted. They had a brief but fiery conversation. He asked questions about logistics, about supply chains. She answered them with clarity and confidence, showing that she was not only an artist, but also a smart business owner. Though her attitude annoyed him, Connor had to admit that there was something about her and her shop that drew him in. Her work had a vitality that mass-produced bouquets could never match. He made his decision on the spot. "Okay, Ms. Hale, I'll hire you." He pulled out a business card. "Your budget is $100,000. Send me a detailed proposal by tomorrow." Savannah gasped. $100,000. That was far more than any contract she'd ever had. It could pay off the rent on her store for a year. It could fix the leaky roof that threatened her flowers every time it rained. It could give her a security she hadn't had in a long time. She took a deep breath. "I agree. But on one condition." "What is it?" Connor asked, a little surprised. "I will have complete creative control. There will be no interference from you or any committee. You either trust me or you don't." Connor stared at her. His instincts screamed at him to stop. He would never relinquish control. But something in her steady eyes convinced him. "Okay, Miss Hale, you got it." The planning meetings that followed often took place late at night at the hotel. After Savannah closed up shop and Connor finished a long day at the office, they were a clash of two worlds. He, with his iPad and spreadsheets, talked about branding, about impressing corporate clients. She, with her sketchbook and dried flowers, talked about creating a space that made people feel welcome, about using color to evoke emotion. "We can't have wildflowers. Savannah," he said impatiently at one meeting. "It doesn't look formal enough. Plain doesn't mean soulless." "Connor," she replied, calling him by his name for the first time. "Wildflowers are powerful. They're resilient. They grow in unexpected places. Isn't that a great message for a charity that helps people in need?" He had no words to say in response. Slowly, he began to realize that she was more than just arranging flowers. She was telling stories. He began to respect the depth and intelligence behind her work, and she, through the crow's feet around his eyes and the way he rubbed his temples when he thought she wasn't looking, began to see the burden he carried. The real change came on a Wednesday night. Connor's younger brother, Julian, got into trouble again. This time, he was driving drunk after leaving a nightclub. Although there was no accident, a paparazzi photographed him being pulled over by the police. The photo would be a PR disaster for the Sterling family, a family with a long history in the legal profession. Connor spent the night using his connections, calling lawyers, journalists, to put out the fire before it got bigger. By midnight, he was sitting alone in his dark office, head in his hands, a sense of exhaustion and helplessness washing over him. He loved his brother, but he was tired of being the cleaner. Just then, the office door opened. It was Savannah. She had come to show him a ribbon sample. She found him sitting there, in the light of a single desk lamp, looking completely devastated. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't offer any empty words of comfort. She just quietly went to the break room, made a cup of chamomile tea, placed it on his desk, and sat down in the chair opposite him in silence. They sat like that for almost an hour. Her silence was a gift. It asked for nothing. It was simply presence. In that moment, a crack appeared in the wall of defense Connor had built around himself over the years. Their relationship began to enter new territory, deeper and more intimate. The phone calls were no longer just about work. He asked her about her day. She asked him if he had dinner. Simple questions, but with genuine concern. Connor began to have nightmares. Not about work, but about Julian. He dreamed that his brother was falling into a deep abyss, and he couldn't hold his hand. In those dreams, the only image that brought him peace was Savannah's flower shop, a haven of light and scent. Savannah had her own nightmares. Nightmares of Marco, of his cold eyes and his sly smile. She dreamed that he had found her, that he had dragged her back into the life she had fought so hard to escape. On those nights, the thought of Connor, a man so steady, so logical, so in control, gave her a fragile sense of security. His name became a mantra whispered in the dark, a lifeline in a sea of anxiety. But Connor's world has its own dangers. Julian Sterling, feeling left out by his brother and bitterly jealous of the attention Connor is giving to his flower girl, decides to take action. If he cannot earn Connor's respect, he will destroy what Connor is beginning to cherish. Julian hired a private investigator. It wasn't hard to dig into someone's past when you had money and no morals. A few weeks later, a file landed on Julian's desk. It contained everything about Savannah Hale's past in Philadelphia, including a police report from a fraud investigation in which she was listed as a person of interest. That evening, Julian stormed into Connor's office. "What the hell are you doing, Connor? You're letting this whole company get screwed over by a personal concern." "Julian, don't start," Connor said, his voice weary. "No, listen." Julian tossed the file onto Connor's desk. "Did you know your little prostitute was a co-defendant in a fraud? She's the person you trusted with a 6-figure contract and your family's reputation." Connor picked up the file. His heart stopped as he read the words. Fraud. Money laundering. Savannah Hale. The cold, sharp feeling of betrayal stabbed him like a shard of ice. He had come to her flower shop after hours. Savannah was sweeping the fallen petals from the floor, looking peaceful under the warm yellow light. The peace made his pain all the more painful. He said nothing, just placed the documents on the counter. Savannah looked at it, then up at him. Her face was pale. Connor, is this true? Savannah. His voice was cold, a defense mechanism to hide his hurt. All of this, tears welling in her eyes. Savannah finally told him everything. About how she fell in love with Marco Gallo, about how they built an art gallery together, how she discovered he was using the gallery as a front to launder money and sell fakes to wealthy collectors. When she confronted him, he became violent. He threatened to hurt her, took her savings, and set her up so that if he was caught, she would end up in jail with him. She was terrified. She ran away, with only a few $100s in her pocket, to Boston, changed her last name, and started over, living in constant fear that one day he would find her. Connor listened. He was a lawyer. Every trained instinct screamed at him about the risk, about the liability, about the danger of getting involved with someone with such a past. But as he looked into her tear-filled eyes, saw the fear and the raw pain there, he made a decision based not on the law, but on something else, something he had long tried to ignore. He stepped closer, wiping a tear from her cheek with his hand. "I believe in you," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "And I will protect you. He won't be able to hurt you again." But Connor underestimated his brother's viciousness. Furious that Connor had chosen to trust Savannah over him, Julian took the final step. He dug into Marco's old files and found the name of a low-level gangster Marco had dealt with, using a prepaid phone. Julian placed an anonymous call, revealing Savannah's current whereabouts. He released the beast back onto its prey, and now, that beast stands in the ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel. After Connor ordered Marco to send me the bill, he didn't waste a second. He discreetly signaled to 2 plainclothes security guards he had hired. They approached Marco quickly and professionally. "Sir, there are some matters that need to be cleared up. Please follow us," one of the 2 said, his tone polite but unapologetic. Marco, realizing his position was weak, did not resist. He was escorted out of the ballroom through a staff passageway, so discreet that most of the guests, engrossed in champagne and conversation, did not notice. But Connor didn't just call security. As soon as Marco was taken away, he pulled out his phone and called his legal team leader, who was waiting. "Go!" He said just 2 words. The plan they had hatched after Savannah's confession was put into action. Connor's team worked with the Boston and Philadelphia police. They had Marco arrested not only for harassing Savannah, but also for extradition to Philadelphia to face a series of fraud and money laundering charges that investigators had gathered based on Savannah's initial information. The beast wasn't just driven away, it was caged. But there is still a snake in the house. The next day, Connor called a family meeting. It was just him, Julian, and their father, a retired Supreme Court justice, a man with even more authority than Connor. Connor didn't beat around the bush. He laid out the evidence of the call Julian had made, traced by a cybersecurity expert, on the table. "You put a woman in danger out of your petty jealousy," Connor told Julian, his voice cold but disappointed. Under the stern gaze of his father and the incontrovertible evidence of his brother, Julian finally broke down. The consequences were in, he was suspended indefinitely from all activities at Sterling and Croft and forced to enter a long-term psychiatric treatment program. The door he had relied on all his life was finally closed. After the storm had passed, Connor found Savannah. She wasn't at the flower shop. She was sitting on a bench in the Boston Public Garden, watching the swans swim across the pond. She looked small and fragile in the vastness of the space. He sat down next to her, took off his jacket and put it around her shaking shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'm sorry I let my world, my family, endanger you." Savannah turned to look at him, a weak smile on her lips. "You don't have to apologize. You saved me. Connor, you gave me my life back." He looked into her clear blue eyes, no longer clouded by fear. For years, he confessed, his voice low. "I was a problem solver. I cleaned up other people's messes, built walls to protect the company, to protect the family. But with you, for the first time, I didn't want to solve problems." He gently raised his hand, caressing her cheek. "I just want to build something beautiful, like your flowers." And he leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss that was not just passionate, but also peaceful. It was a promise of safety, trust, and a new beginning, where the past was no longer a prison, but a lesson. 6 months later, Petal and Stem has changed. It's bigger, brighter, with a new studio space in the back. It's become one of Boston's top floral shops, featured in design magazines, and has a long list of clients. Savannah has changed too. She still wears an apron, her hands are still dirty, but the worry that always haunted her eyes has disappeared, replaced by confidence and radiance. Connor was in the shop on a Saturday afternoon. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a thin sweater and jeans, the sleeves rolled up. His hands were a little dirty from clumsily trying to help her tie the lavender bouquets. He looked relaxed and happy. As the last customer left, and Savannah hung the closed sign on the door, it was just the two of them, surrounded by the scent of thousands of flowers. Connor wiped his hands and walked over to her. He said nothing, just looked at her with deep love. Then he took a small velvet box from his pocket. "I've spent my life building walls." "Savannah," he said, his voice sincere, "I thought that was the way to keep things safe. But you've taught me that the most beautiful gardens, the ones truly worth protecting, don't need walls. They need light, care, and freedom to grow." He opened the box. Inside was an exquisite platinum ring with a small diamond cut in the shape of an unfurling leaf. "Savannah Hale, would you like to build a garden with me?" Tears of happiness rolled down Savannah's cheeks as she smiled, a smile as bright as the sunflowers behind her. She didn't need to say anything. She just threw herself into his arms. Amidst the myriad of colors and scents of flowers, a lawyer and a florist, two seemingly distant worlds, found their common ground, ready to cultivate a beautiful, resilient, and lasting love, like the wildflowers she loves. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you love this story, don't forget to click like to support the channel. Share this story with family and friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories.